Back in 1981, a rare opportunistic infections and cancers started to spread. They were stubbornly resistant to any kind of treatment. They were spreading among men in New York and in California. This condition would finally get a name in 1986. It was known as HIV/AIDS, or better known, or a short form for HIV and AIDS, is human immunodeficiency virus and acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. These are the actual names that they were given this. At first, people thought that this disease was only for gay men. But in 1982, when IV drug users, hemophiliacs, and women as well started to come down with the condition, the world looked at this disease in a whole new light. It now lost its original name, GRID, which stands for Gay-Related Immune Deficiency. Men and women and children alike were finding themselves isolated, shunned, and unwanted. Their families and their friends were turning their backs on them left and right. A gentleman by the name of Carl was 19 years old when he talked to the Washington Post and gave his story. His story was about the fact that he found out 2 years earlier that he was HIV positive. He didn't know how his mother was going to react once he told her. He didn't know if she was going to disown him, if she was going to throw him out on the street. But when he did finally tell her, she did isolate him in the house. He ate off of paper plates, drank out of plastic cups, ate with plastic utensils. He didn't share anything with his brothers and sisters. In his own words, he says, "It hurt me. It really hurt me. I felt like I had pushed myself away from my family." I know way too many of these stories like Carl's. Way too many people that are left to die a lonely death, asking themselves questions such as, can you love me? Will you love me? Why don't you love me? So many times we look back in our lives, and we look back in the lives of friends and loved ones that we have lost to a sickness, cancer, any kind of related illness that we have lost them to. And we ask ourselves, did they know how much I love them? Did I show them enough how much I love them? Don't let a sickness or a death have you asking yourself these questions. Leave no doubt in anybody's mind that when they think of you, that all they think about is how much you love them. Give your love like there's no tomorrow. In the scripture, 1 Corinthians 13, you hear that love is many things. Love is selfless. To truly love someone is to truly give of your heart and not to expect anything in return. And at the same time, love is protective. If we think about a mother's love for her child, any time that you see this love, anywhere from the animal kingdom all the way into humanity, you can see how a mother's love will protect her offspring. It's because of love. And then when all else fails, when all else is done in, when everything else is gone, love can always win. When you leave here today, there is no doubt, there will be no doubt of what kind of love that Jesus Christ himself has given you and the kind of love that he wants you to give back in return. When you look back at 1 Corinthians, you're not just going to see it, hopefully, anymore as a chapter in the Bible on love. I'm more hoping that you'll see it more as a checklist for yourself, that you will check yourself against it to find out, are you giving that kind of love? When I chose my date to give this sermon, it totally had slipped my mind that tomorrow, being December the 1st, was World AIDS Day. It totally left me. Till one day I was sitting and it came to me. This is what the next day is going to happen. Actually, I will tell you the truth. It came to me while I was sitting in chapel listening to the last missionary giving his talk. It was almost as if God put this big weight on me and said, do you realize the day you preach is the day before World AIDS Day? Many people around the world have been touched by this disease. Maybe they're caring for a loved one right now with HIV. They are living themselves with HIV. Or they have lost someone to HIV or to AIDS. There could be some of you right now, right here in this room, that are carrying that same hurt. Reach out and give your love. Reach out and wrap your loving arms around yourselves, around your friends. Give your love in such a way that God's healing power can reach in and start to heal the wounds. And let that love start with you. See, love is unconditional. When you look into the Oxford's Pocket Dictionary of Current English Language, the word selfless is defined as a meaning that is concerning more with the needs and wishes of others than with one's own. It also uses the word unselfish. It is an act of selfless devotion. Then if you look at the word love, love is defined as an intense feeling of deep affection. I kind of played around with these meanings, and I put it together as if we were to give unselfish love. And I kind of came up with my own definition of unselfish love. And you could say that selfless love would be an intense feeling of deep affection with selfless devotion concerning more with the needs and wishes of others. I ran across a letter called A Poem for a Brother. This letter was written by a woman by the name of Karen. She was a little sister to a gentleman by the name of Daniel Moses Muller. See, Daniel lost his life in 1987 with his battle to HIV and AIDS. Now, I don't know much about Karen. Because see, back in the 80s when the stigma of HIV was so prominent, a lot of people didn't give their full names due to the stigma that goes behind even being around someone that had HIV. So when Karen wrote this letter, all she did was write it and say that her name was Karen and that her brother was Daniel. Even though I don't know Karen, when I read her words that she wrote for her brother, I can find powerful, powerful meanings of what unconditional love is. Now, this letter is quite long, but I wanted you to hear a small portion of it. So I'm going to read a small portion of it to you. And it goes like this. I remember the last hospital visit. Mom and Dad decided to bring you home. I remember helping take care of you. I remember the bleach. I remember those damn latex gloves. I remember the doctors and nurses saying to wear them when I touched you. I remember the hands that held mine so tight when I was little, that rubbed my back to calm me when I cried. I took off those gloves. I rubbed your sore, withering back with my warm, loving hands. And I remember seeing a glimpse of that old dignity in those tired, hollowed-out eyes. You see, back in the 80s, as I said before, there wasn't a lot known about HIV and AIDS when this first hit the mainstream. One of the main concerns with HIV and AIDS back then was just to touch someone with HIV, you had it. But here, in Karen's letter to her brother, we see how she didn't care about the risk that she was taking on. She loved her brother so much, and she saw the pain of what he was going through. She took off her gloves, and she rubbed his back. We have people in the world right now dying daily of HIV. In 2007, right here in the United States of America, we lost a total of 14,561 people to HIV and AIDS. You need to go back to 1 Corinthians 13 and check yourself and see if you're giving your love like there's no tomorrow. But love can protect a broken heart. When you leave your home, I bet you lock your door so that the thieves can't break in while you're gone. I also bet that when you park your car, if you have a GPS system or an iPod or anything of protective value or of monotone value, you lock it away. Locked away from the thieves and predators that could break into your car and steal it. I want to ask you a question. Is your heart under lock and key? Is your heart locked away in some safety deposit box, hidden away to where you can't give your love? Has your heart been broken that bad that you don't even know how to give love anymore? It is so easy for us to replace those material objects, but yet it is so hard for our broken hearts to heal. In the fall of 1999, Winnie, a 36-year-old Zulu woman from Durban, South Africa, discovered that she was HIV positive when she got sick 1 year after being raped. Terrified and alone, she went and confided in her sister. Her sister, in return, went and told her mother. Her mother isolated and shunned her from the family. Winnie goes on to tell her story, and she tells about how that her mom and her sisters and her family would not even touch her dishes, nor would they even touch her laundry. She actually calls it her washing. Her mother isolated her and basically told her she didn't want to hear of it because this meant that she was dirty and that this was something that only prostitutes would get, or so on, is what they felt. She then turned to her best friend for love and support, and her best friend shunned her and then went around telling people about Winnie's HIV status. In the end, Winnie says, "So I don't advise to have a friend because she will start gossip. It is better to be alone." Many times when somebody finds out they're HIV positive, stories like Winnie happen all around the world. That person finds themselves shunned and rejected out of fear. Many times people living with HIV react with the same statement. It is better off to be alone than to be rejected. But you know what? You can change that story. You can start a whole new chapter in someone's life. You can start to offer that love by showing them that love, by giving them that love. You know, Winnie's story of rejection still happened. It happened back in 1999. And the sad thing is, we're living in 2009, and that story still rings true to right here and right now. Men, women, and children from babies to teens that are finding out that they are HIV positive are still dying lonely deaths because of rejection. If you claim to be a God-fearing Christian, a disciple of Jesus, why is this happening? Where is your love for your fellow brother and sister? Why are we not protecting their hearts? Protecting them from that fear of rejection? There is a gentleman by the name of Richard Bach who wrote a book called Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. And one quote from his book in chapter 6, on page 84, still to this day rings so true. And this book was written back in 1977. But I love this one quote from Richard Bach. The bond that links your true family is not one of blood, but of respect and joy in each other's lives. Rarely do members of one family grow up under the same roof. If you think about it, over 2,000 years ago, when Christ laid down his life for you and I, when he stretched out his arms and died for each one of us, his blood that flowed to save us from our sins also links us together as brothers and sisters. So protect your brothers and sisters with your love that will shield them from a life and the hurt of rejection. And give your love like there's no tomorrow. You know, at some point in time of our lives, I know that each and every one of us have either read a fairy tale or we've watched a Disney movie to where, you know, the handsome prince comes riding in, he saves the maiden, and they ride off into the sunset. And then, on the very last page of the book, or right before those credits roll, we see that one famous line that we each and all know and we each and all love. And they lived happily ever after. Well, the good thing is that not always do fairy tales have to end this way, that real life stories cannot always, or cannot also end that way, because they can. Real life stories can also end with the saying, and they lived happily ever after. Or he lived happily ever after. Or she lived happily ever after. See, there's a little boy. He's 10 years old when he wrote this letter. His name was Ben. And Ben found out about his HIV status at the age of 10. But he also found out at the same time that his mother was a prostitute and a cocaine addict. When she took him to the adoption agency, they wouldn't even let him in. They would not even accept this child because of her condition. But the good news is that Ben actually was adopted. Ben goes on to write his own personal letter, and in the letter, he states, "My family is wonderful. Even though I feel like there is something missing, what I have is priceless." He goes on to say that he is now living with meds that are perfect, that are keeping his virus in remission, and that it is a wonderful thing, and that he actually feels normal and not shunned from the world. My life is going great. And he wants to share his story with other teens around the world, to offer them a glimpse of hope. There are so many more stories that we should be hearing like that of Ben's. There should be more stories of acceptance, of hope, and of love. You can help write these stories by simply giving of your love. Showing the love that Christ showed you. You know, it really doesn't matter how someone becomes infected of HIV. Who cares how they become infected by HIV? Just the fact that they have it and they're scared of rejection and they know that they're going to be fighting a battle. Don't make them fight it alone. Love them as well as you can. Look into your own heart and find that love. Show that love. And then give that love. No one should ever die feeling alone or abandoned, hurt, rejected, or lost. Check yourself with 1 Corinthians 13, so that everyone that knows you will know God's love through you. Give your love like there's no tomorrow. I will leave you with the final letter that I found in this book. This book was published by Avon Books. It contains many letters from many people. And what these letters are adjacent with, they are attached to, are panels of this quilt. A woman by the name of Nancy found out in 1988 that her mother, who was only 66 years old, was HIV positive. Her mother contracted the disease by a blood transfusion during a heart bypass operation. But when her mother found out, the stigma of AIDS was so rapid that they swore Nancy to silence. Nancy could not share her grief, her sadness, her heartbreaking of watching her mother die with anyone, in fear that even she would be rejected or her father would have to go on being rejected by his friends, all because of an operation that her mother had nothing to do with and contracted this disease. Nancy watched as her mother died a slow death, a silent death. Even when she wrote this letter and she made the panel, her father asked her to please don't put her mother's name on it in fear that one of their friends would see it. The letter is entitled Mom. And as I read this letter to you, I was so happy and so honored that when I requested this panel of the AIDS quilt, I requested a specific panel. I'd like for you to watch and listen and read and look at the panel that Nancy made for her mother. This is Nancy's panel. Her mother's name was Irene. This panel I made is a lasting memorial in memory of my mother, who contracted AIDS through a blood transfusion. She suffered in silence because of the social stigma of AIDS. Please don't make these victims embarrassed and ashamed of their illness, but reach out in love and embrace them. When we begin to love, we can begin to heal each other. My mother loved the ocean, palm trees, and her beautiful flower garden. I have faith she is now in a gorgeous garden surrounded by the peace and the love of God. You're a very brave mom, and it hurts me to see you suffer. You're a wonderful mother who taught me so much about life. I love you, and I miss you. I pray that people become more compassionate and understanding of the tremendous hurt and loneliness these people and their families endure. A loving daughter from New England. Give your love like there's no tomorrow.